Hello, good evening, everyone. I trust that you are doing well tonight. If you are on, just introduce yourself and let me know that you can hear us. Let us know your name and where you are watching from. Okay, let me just mute my phone here so that I don't interrupt during the presentation. Voila, my phone is off. Alrighty, welcome to our weekly webinar master series. I trust you've had an awesome week so far. And so we have another wonderful guest with us tonight, but of course, I'll do the introduction in just a moment. So we want to make sure, first of all, you are hearing us clearly. So just type in the chat that you can hear and you can also see us here. So we have a few people trickling on here. We have Patty, Raul, Hector, Robert, Donna, Melissa. Okay, let's see what we got here. Okay, Hector says yes, you can already. Awesome. So we're going to slip over in just a moment to our PowerPoint slide. Now, here's another thing. Doris says yes. Okay, thank you, ma'am, for confirming you can hear and see us. What we're going to do is this. If you are new on here tonight, what I want you to do, this is always our, technology stuff. If by chance the presentation freezes, all you have to do is right above your this video on your computer or on your mobile device, you're going to see a button that says either refresh or reconnect. Just click on that and everything should be fine. And that's why we are asking these preliminary questions. Okay. Martha, greetings from Austin, Texas. Awesome. We have Austin in the house. I know we have San Antonio in the house. I'm in Edinburgh. And our guest is, I think, Harlingen. In just a moment, he let us know. Okay. Awesome, awesome. So as you come in again, just do the formal greetings. Let us know that you're here. We can acknowledge your presence with us. So I'm going to slip over now to our PowerPoint presentation for this evening, introduce our guests so we can go right on into it. You're going to love tonight's presentation. It's going to be all about dealing with addiction and recovery. And I know that you're going to be blessed by it. So Philip from McAllen, welcome, Philip. Good to have you here this evening. Let's see who else jumped on here. Well, we have Doris already acknowledged Doris on here. Okay, good stuff. Melissa, gentlemen, hello. Blessings from McAllen. Wonderful. Dr. Robert Lewis is on here. Yes, wonderful. Doc, you kicked it off. You are our very first presenter. And so we thank you. Now we are at number 5. Actually, this is halfway. So we thank you for leading us. And so we welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight, Dr. Robert Lewis. Good to have you on tonight. Alrighty, let me slip over right now to the PowerPoint. Start presentation. Okay. Alrighty, so now we are on the presentation. I'm going to officially begin at this moment. For those of you, again, this is primarily a university class. So what we're going to do is there will be a 24-hour only replay so that some students can retake. I am going to put in the download here for you last week's presentation. Not last week, actually on Monday's presentation, I forgot to give you Dr. Barbosa's handout. So let me do that right now. Okay, so right below here is her presentation. So you can go ahead and download that. I'll leave it up for after the introduction, and I'll take it down for a new presenter. But you will have that there. You can click on there. It'll open into a new browser. Feel free to go ahead and just save that, okay? Awesome. So welcome to Secrets of Mental and Emotional Wellness. This is our online masterclass for professionals. This is a 5 weeks presentation, 10 total. And so it's going to be every Monday and Thursdays at 7:30 p.m. Central Time, 8:30 Eastern. So we want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us this evening. For those of you, again, who may be new, my name is Chance, U.S. Navy veteran, #1 best-selling author, and also a minister. I bring these presentations to you through strategic secrets so that we can help people take charge of their professional life, their spiritual life, and every other area of their life as well, including, of course, as we are seeing here, their emotional and mental states also. We bring on different lecturers who are able to give you strategic insights from different perspectives, scientific and otherwise. So wherever you are on the spectrum, we know that each week as you tune in, you will get information that deals with the relevant aspects of your life, your career, and all of that. We give you the strategies here. So this also, we have put this on. Our regular trainings are normally on Thursday evenings, but we added a Monday evening to facilitate students at the University of Southern Indiana. And many of these are in the nursing program or nurse practitioner program. And so this is for the benefit of them primarily, but for anyone who also has interest in these particular topics, we always welcome you. So we make it both technical and user friendly for the average lay person like myself. And that's why at the end of the presenter's lecture, then we will be doing an interview and asking Q&A for any clarification. So we've had several presenters on. Of course, we have 6 more presentations to go, including the one tonight. So we started out with Dr. Robert Lewis, followed by Dr. Donna Cooper, and then Edwin Tamayo. Last Monday, we had Dr. Shirley Barbosa. Tonight, we're actually going to be having Mr. David Chong. And then next week, you'll be able to hear from Judith Frazier and Dr. Americo Baca. So these are our upcoming guests. After that, we'll only have 2 more presentations to go. So we are dealing with several subjects from different angles. And again, we hope that this will not only enrich your professional life, but especially your personal life also. So this is a 5 weeks class, as we stated, okay, 2 days a week, Monday nights and Thursday nights at 7:30 p.m. And so we are almost there. Tonight is actually the halfway point. So please stick with us for the remaining 5 presentations. So this is the outline of how it's going to flow. Well, again, we have our guest presenter. I'll introduce him at this moment. And then he or she, depending on who is on, but tonight we have a gentleman, and he will be presenting on the topic for tonight is addiction and recovery. So that will run about 45 minutes or so. Then I will interview for 10, 15 maximum, but about 10 minutes normally is what we've been averaging for me interviewing the host, kind of trying to make it personal and make it applicable to the average person's life also. And any other technical things that need clarification, then that's where we do that. Then we open it to the floor. If you do have any questions throughout the presentations, we ask that you jot them down and that you will bring them to the attention of our expert presenter, and he or she will be able to answer them as best as they can, of course. So far, we've had a good dialogue, so you can just type it in either beforehand or, you know, when we do the interview, anywhere along those lines. But what I normally do, even myself, I take a few little notes, and anything that stands out, I made a little note of it so that I can interview the guest presenter on there also. So let me take a moment now to introduce to you our guest for tonight, Mr. David A. Chong, and he is a licensed professional counselor in the state of Texas. He holds a bachelor's degree in clinical psychology from the University of Montemorelos and a master's degree in rehab counseling from the University of Texas Pan Am. Since 2012, Mr. Chung has been working with at-risk youth and their families and currently serves as a mental health counselor with NU Today Counseling Services. The areas where he currently provides these services, therapeutic services, include anger management, substance abuse counseling, grief counseling, cognitive behavioral therapy, cognitive processing therapy, group counseling, and also Christian and faith-based counseling as well. So I think tonight he has a rich experience in being able to bring together so many different aspects of this topic. And so it's going to be a broad stroke, yet it's going to also be focused. So I'm glad that he has different areas where he focuses and provides services. So Mr. Chong, we give the floor to you. Thank you so much for taking your time out. Again, for those of you who are on the chat, let us welcome in good old-fashioned way of welcoming our guest tonight. So can you just put in the chat here so David knows that you are watching, listening? Please, please, please put something in the chat here welcoming David to our presentation tonight. Mr. Chong, the floor is yours. You can control the rest of the slides from here on out.
Thank you very much, sir. Can everybody hear me good? Yes? All right. Very well. So, yes, as Pastor Chan said, my name is David Chong. I'm currently with New Today Counseling Services. This is an agency, a counseling agency, a Christian counseling agency located here in Harlingen, Texas. This is where the main office is at. And we also have a contract with Los Fresnos School District, visiting other schools from elementary to high school, providing services on the different campuses for any mental health needs that they would refer our way. And the agency also provides services for sex offender treatment. It also has a contract with Cameron County with the Justice Department in that sense. So we're over here right now. I've been in the mental health field for about 10 years. Started as a case manager at Tropical, Texas. This is the local mental health clinic, local MHMR. I've also have experience teaching and counseling in schools, as well as for about 4 years, I was one of the counselors at the Cameron County Juvenile Justice Department Center. There, I was able to work with youth and their families in individual, group sessions, and family sessions in different areas, substance abuse being one of them. Um, and in the different areas of the juvenile justice department within the detention center that they have there, within the boot camp. The boot camp consists of a 6-month program where they can go back home, and for juveniles from 15 to 17 years old, only males. And then there's other programs, 8-bed programs for males and females as well, Brave and Life that they call it. And then there's a day academy as well, paramilitary style. And we would incorporate counseling sessions within the programming. So I was able to do that and then give follow-up reentry services. But for it's about 2012, we've been in some way, shape, or form. We've been part of this agency. Like I said, being in group sessions with sex offenders, being in individual group sessions here as well with adults or with families. And we're going to draw a little bit from that experience, also from a little bit of literature research, and just a big part also for the DSM-5 when it comes to diagnosing what we're talking about. So we're going to talk about addiction. And the APA, American Psychiatric Association, says or defines it as a complex condition of brain disease manifested by compulsive substance despite harmful consequences. This is something that many people, especially family members, struggle with when they see that their loved one, they see their child is struggling, and they pick them up at a park or are looking for them around the neighborhood, or find them again at some other house, a stash house. They talk to them and the person understands, but they keep on doing it again. So this is a characteristic of this situation. Is knowing that there's an issue, knowing that it causes problems, but continuing to do them, to choose to do this well. Very intense focus on these substances. When it comes to addiction, most of the literature, when you read addiction or when you see addiction, it refers to drugs, and we'll talk about a little bit later regarding behavior, because we've also heard of other addictions, right? But most of the time, when it comes into addiction, it talks about, making reference to drugs being chronic. The National Institute of Drug Abuse mentions that it's got to be chronic and relapsing disorder. Again, that it continues despite harmful consequences, long-lasting changes to the brain, considered both complex disorder and mental health disorder, within the spectrum of substance disorders, mental illnesses, repeated misuse. Now, there has been ongoing research from different areas in the medical field or in mental health. One of them being with this whole neuroscience, with neuroplasticity, and how that impacts the different areas, including addiction. And the American Center of Addiction Medicine adopted just 2019 this new definition, this new position on addiction. It's something based on research that has been going on since 2011, but that is a treatable and chronic medical disease involving complex interactions among brain circuits, genetics, the environment, and the individual's life experiences. So they begin to broaden the definition, and with people with addiction, use substances, engage in behaviors that become compulsive, often continue despite harmful consequences. Now, this is interesting and important because there were some changes to the newest edition, the DSM-5, the Diagnostic Statistic Manual, that is used within psychiatry and psychology and counseling, professional counselors, to diagnose mental illnesses or disorders. And we'll go a little bit deeper later on into what the changes were. But this begins to open the door for addictions not only to be within substances or drugs. Prevention efforts in treatment approaches for addiction generally are successful. So we were going past this idea that for many years we had, that once you're addicted, you just kind of go along and kind of maintain this disease, but that it is preventable and that it can be successful to get through this chronic disease. So if we're going to talk about this, there's some definitions, that we see about drugs. These are some of the, we could say, popular, common ones that maybe you've heard. A common definition for a drug is any substance, even in small amounts, that produces significant change in the body, mind, or both. And as drugs are going right now, especially with fentanyl and other chemical drugs, they can make them very, very small in amount and in grams, but it can be very potent with deadly consequences. Any substance, another definition, natural or artificial, that by its chemical or physical nature changes physical, psychological, or chemical functioning in the organism. So any substance, anything that is going to change. And it can be very broad, and sometimes people don't understand this. I try to be very clear, especially with the young kids that I work with, or the teenagers, that there are drugs. There's a lot of prescribed drugs that we don't think of them as drugs, but can be abused. There's a lot of legal drugs that we don't think of them as drugs, but they are still chemicals that our body doesn't naturally need, doesn't naturally produce, that can alter our psychological state, that can alter our mood, that can alter our body. So we have to keep that in mind. Now, terminology, this is kind of an issue. It continues to evolve, continues to change. It's not entirely a bad thing. That just means mostly because there's more research being done, there's more studies. We continue to update the knowledge that we have, not only about substances, not only about drugs, but also about how we function as people, how our mind functions, how our brain, our organ functions. And it's a good thing that we continue to learn about ourselves, and we continue to be able to treat it better and develop new theories, new approaches. But the basic problem is still the same. Drugs are still, people can misuse them, alcohol and other drugs, and that's the main issue, that they get abused and misused. One of the big problems when it comes to substance disorders is that there's so many definitions by different writers, different perspectives, different substances coming up, different eras, different DSMs, different codes, different organizations have their different perspective on it. And sometimes it's hard to keep up with terminology of misuse, of alcohol, of abuse, of disorders. So there tends to be some disagreements at times on exactly what addiction is and what the drugs are, and who engages them. So one of the most asked questions, or the $1,000,000 question, especially if there's the relative involved, is why? Why do we get into drugs? Why do people do drugs? And we would love to say that it's a very simple answer. It's a black and white, but it depends. It depends a lot. It's one of these things that involves choices, and why do people do what they do? Now, we're not talking specifically of why a person chose to, or why a person ended up, with an addiction. But we can call them risk factors. We can call them reasons. But it can go anywhere from religious practices, that it's in a ritual, that, a substance, an hallucinogen, or anything like that can be part of a religious practice by simple boredom or curiosity. I have had, in family sessions, a young man in boot camp, and this was, to me, it was an important step as a counselor because he was actually being honest, he was being genuine, and he was opening up to his mom, which was already difficult, and it wasn't a common practice to communicate and without fighting or screaming. Um, and one of the reasons for the choices or the behavior he was doing is because he was bored, and mom just simply couldn't understand, couldn't process, couldn't register that. But it is a curiosity. I was just curious. It was there. My older siblings were doing it, so I wanted to do it. I want to see what it was, or I wanted to be like them, modeling. Despair, going through many different issues, going through personal situations, and you just want to feel better, to treat a disease. This can be too, especially with the whole opioid situation. There have People are prescribed medication, and then they begin to abuse it, or to actually treat a disease with this whole movements of legalizing marijuana among other substances. Um, Peer pressure. You want to be like us, you want to hang out with us. Social interactions, at parties, at gatherings, at family reunions. It's in And it happens, and I'm talking about alcohol and drugs, anything like that. It happens that many of us have been in situations where you're just watching a game, either it's football or a sport, or it's just a hangout with the family or a cookout. And it's very common that there's beer, there's liquor, there's cigarettes, there's the pills. It has become very routine and very socially accepted that is part of the celebration. Artistic enlightenment. I draw better, I play better, I write better music, or I can write better my poetry. Escape. I just want to get out of where I'm at, and I would want to escape my reality, escape the situation. If I can't escape it physically, I would want to just put pause on everything that I'm going through, just to relax. Most of the teenagers and the people that I've talked to that smoke marijuana, it's just one of the benefits that they see, that they can just chill, that they just can relax, that they can just feel comfortable, and they can just vibe. Um, just right now, I was doing a session before the presentation, and we're making pretty good progress because he had kind of gone away with that, and we're using other skills to cope with situations. I feel like with this virus, we kind of took some steps back, and he reverted to relying also on just smoking joints, smoking marijuana. And I was calling to his attention that where is the progress, because he's dealing better with certain things, he's a lot better mood, but I was asking him, where's the progress? Are we relying, uh, it seems like we're relying a lot on this substance, and then where are we putting the progress on, either on the substance or on the choices that you're making. Lifestyle, family tradition, where we grew up, where things were around us, where it was a custom in the family, or even culture. It's culturally accepted. It's like a rite of passage, to be around drugs. People do drugs because they work, because they deliver their purpose. Because drugs don't lie. If it was a downer, if it was to make me relax, to make me feel better, that tends to happen. If I needed to pick up, if I needed more energy, if I need a better mood, I can find those. They change. Science has showed us that there is, in our nervous system, there's electrical currents that are changed, that chemicals get released, and this in turn changes our mood, changes our energy, and we get a result from it. And it tends to be, if not immediate, it tends to be relatively fast. So many times people do drugs because they work, because what I want to get out of it, I usually get it. As I've been working in different situations, in different places, a lot of this information, a lot of the research that's been going on is used to develop curriculum, to develop different approaches. This is part of that from the Forward Thinking, from the Substance Using Behavior Journal. It's an interactive journal, but I like how they presented it to the youth or to the client, because it also talks about making the person understand that there's a relationship with this alcohol or drug, and there's different levels of the relationship, where there's a no use or responsible use. You just simply don't use it. You don't engage with it. You're not around it, or you choose to consume it, but in small roles where you're still controlling the situation, where it never controls you, or you just use it as it was prescribed to you. Misuse it gets to be a little bit more intense, where it begins to cause some problems in your life and different areas of your life, but it doesn't disrupt with major consequences because of your drinking, your behavior. It might be some social drama, it might be bad grades, but the person doesn't feel like it's got to the point where the consequences are very severe. Now, they also mentioned, addiction, if you put it at this level, is using and recovering from alcohol and drugs, and using this over everything else, over these other areas, over family, over friends, over school, where this is the most important thing and aspect in your life. Surrounding yourself with these places, with these people, where most of your time and effort and energy is going towards consuming, finding, using these type of substances, and it results very difficult to quit, very difficult to move on from this lifestyle, even if you attempt moving away from it. So this is one of the images that we would discuss when I would show this picture to my groups, when I was doing group sessions with these young adults. I mean, you can leave in the comments what you think of the picture or what comes to mind. But when I would show them this image, to many of them, they would nod their head, they would smile, they would kind of reminisce, because for many people, the substance, the drug, the joint, the pill, the alcohol is what has always been there, is what has never let them down, what has never betrayed them, is their comfort and something that they can rely on. And many times it's not seen as something that is unhealthy or is aversive or is a danger, but as an outlet that they can trust. Many times, or it's very rare when in treatment or in counseling or in therapy, we're only dealing with the substance use issue. There are always either a comorbid diagnosis, or there's underlying issues, or there's adverse childhood experiences. But it's very rare that we're only dealing specifically and just having to do with this. There's always something else behind it, and many times it has something to do with trust, with trusting the people around me, and this is something I can trust. So it is, in essence, we develop a relationship with the substances. So going into the Diagnostic Statistic Manual, which is the manual that we use, again, most of the people in the mental field, mental health field, this is what they use to diagnose a substance use disorder. Whether it's a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a licensed professional counselor, licensed chemical dependency counselor, this is the guideline that we use in this country to diagnose. So it has changed the criteria. Some of the criteria has been modified. The actual category and the chapter has changed, and it's changed to substance-related and addictive disorders. And there's some positives behind that, as we'll talk about right now. But there's basically three, or mind-altering substances are basically put into three basic types of disorders: substance intoxication, withdrawal, or use disorder. Now, this use disorder was what's formerly known as substance dependence or substance abuse. Now, in the substance use disorder, a user has taken this substance frequently enough to produce a clinically important distress or impair functioning, resulting in behavior characteristics. So there has to be a significant impact in that person's life. And then, yes, you take into consideration duration as well of how long it's been consumed. Also found connection with all the classes of drugs but caffeine. Substance use disorder can develop accidentally, especially from use of medicine to treat chronic pain. Now, we also have intoxication and withdrawal. Um, I'm still in the office, so excuse the phone ringing. Um, let me. So, the intoxication is a clinical condition that results in overuse of the substance. Right? Anyone can become intoxicated. This is the only substance-related diagnosis that can apply to a person just using it once. And withdrawal is the collection of symptoms that a person has, depending on the specific class of that you're diagnosing, that develops when a person frequently tries to discontinue the substance and tries to reduce the amount that they're using. All right, so some of the symptoms in the substance use disorder have to do with impaired control, where you're trying, these cravings and urges begin to cause issues, and you're trying to attempt to cut down, but you're struggling with controlling that. Social problems, whether it's at home, at school, with your relationship that you have, leisure activities, you begin to cut back on those things because of substances. Risky use, risky settings, going into meeting people and different times of people that you don't know. You're going out into parts of town that you don't really trust, you don't really know, among others, and drug effects, the tolerance. Needing larger and larger amounts to be able to get the same pleasure or the same high that you would. So the classifications, the classes are these: alcohol, amphetamines, caffeine, cannabis, hallucinogens, inhalants, opioids, sedatives, tobacco, and other unknown substances. These are the main ones that we know, that we've studied, that there's research behind it. Unfortunately, there's constantly new variations of drugs, new ways of doing them. Sometimes you struggle within how to diagnose it, something that fits best in one of these criteria. I'll give you an example, because I've had several kids tell me that they know how to do their own drugs, their own homemade drugs. Spice, which is basically, Spice is a brand, there's basically a brand, but in essence what they're saying is synthetic marijuana or synthetic weed. And with a lot of the synthetic marijuana, a lot of it is not even marijuana. It's other substances, other leaf-like texture, or other leaves, period. Some of these kids would just use spices like oregano or different spices that you find around to cook. They would crush them up, and then they would put either an insecticide or some type of chemical on it. They would spray it. They would let it soak in and dry, do a couple of coats, and then they would smoke that. So sometimes it's tricky to diagnose. You try to fit in best to what it goes, and then within these classes, then you would specify the intensity, if it's mild, if it's moderate, if it's severe. You would clarify that as well. So some of the criteria to use when you're trying to, for these classes, is the individual takes substance in large amounts, if they express a persistent desire to cut down and regulate but they can't, if they spend excessive amount of time in any activity, which is obtaining or using or recovering or even selling sometimes, the cravings, how intense they are, the individual continues to use despite the recurrent social interpersonal problems. They're getting charges, they're getting DWIs, they're losing a job, they're having issues with their socially, occupationally, recreationally, the risky behavior or the risky use, and the tolerance and withdrawal symptoms. So one definition that I found that I like is the compulsive engagement in behaviors that bring short-term reward but long-term discussion. And the reason why I like that is because I have seen as we continue, or as as research begins to move on within this area of addiction, it can begin to be broader and encompass even behavioral addictions or addictions from behaviors, right? No matter the addiction that brings short-term pleasure, even if it's accepted by society, um, if not overcome, it will completely ensnare and destroy you. Um, we can legalize many substances or many things, but legalizing and making it healthy for a person are two different things. We can accept that somebody uses something, and as long as you keep it at a minimum, it won't harm you that much. But I try to bring this up in discussions when I work with people. If you have to justify, if you have to say it's not that bad, then maybe we should consider why we're taking this. Maybe it's not good either. So anything that can bring this compulsive behavior can be this addiction. Another definition is activity that has become the primary focus. Where is most of the time going? And this is also with these characteristics. That's why we'll also get into these different lists that we're talking about. But where is the time going? Where are we spending most of the time, the energy, the attention? Excuse me. And where we begin to exclude others and other activities, and especially with things that can cause us harm. So behavioral addictions by nature tend to be compulsive, where you continue to engage in them and they're not beneficial for you. And you find either psychological or physical high when engaging in these type of activities, and then maybe get some remorse, get some guilt, feeling overwhelmed and not liking the consequences that come with it. Some of the addictions that you might have heard or you might consider, and you might hear them a lot as behavioral addictions, are gambling, love, sex or porn. Some people put them all together. Some people separate them. But shopping, internet, and social media. Social media at times even specific, not just internet in general, but social media specifically with that wanting to be posting things, to be liked, to have things out there and be looking at how much progress I've made or how many followers I've got going on, and just devoting all this time and forgetting to do even sometimes basic needs like eating, like sleeping, like showering, like grooming, video gaming, and a lot of that we see as well. Exercise, food. Now, from all of these, the only one that we will find with a diagnostic criteria within the DSM-5 is gambling. And I believe with what we are seeing within the research that's probably one of the reasons why they changed the name of this category to leave it open as research continues to begin to add possibly different areas and different addictions that aren't necessarily tied into substances, but that have to do with behaviors. Because many of them, science has shown us, research has shown us that they resemble a lot of the domains, the characteristics of substance addictions. The tolerance, the history of them, how to develop, the comorbidity, overlapping genetic contributions, the neurobiological mechanisms. So as I was saying, as of now, gambling is the only one in the DSM-5 where we can have criteria to diagnose, where there's enough research, where there is enough data to be able to justify it as within a classification in addiction disorders. But there's much research coming in, and there's many people making a push for opening and putting this criteria for these that we've mentioned. So when we talk about addiction, there's always a compulsive behavior, and we hear a lot cravings and urges. So craving being, this desire to get that pleasure from the compulsion, a state of arousal. It can come either from I'm feeling really bad and I got into a fight, or I'm kind of down and depressed, or just something that reminded you of pleasure that you've gotten in the past. And an urge is more of the actual intention of doing a specific behavior to satisfy that craving. Now, when we put them together, we can, Moran and Levinson, in their curriculum for sex offender treatment, they mention it as a problem of immediate gratification. So this experience of a strong craving and an urge to relieve the craving through behavior. Now, when this happens, when we're able to get this immediate gratification, it can drive the person to find a way to satisfy this desire without giving any thought of the consequences. Um, you don't stop and think about what's going on because it feels very important. Like this is the thing that you have to do at this moment to just satisfy this desire. It takes over common sense, and you start lying to yourself very often of just this once, or I deserve it. I'm not really hurting anyone. Now, at times, we might even say this to ourselves, or we might hear people say it. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're addicted or even that they have compulsive behavior. Now, these are very common cognitive distortions. A cognitive distortion is basically reasoning and justifying with myself to be able to do something that I know and that is probably not the best thing for me to do. That's probably not going to give me a good consequence. But I reason it out so much that I essentially lie to myself and give myself permission and justify to go do this at least just this once. The problem is that once you feed the pig, it becomes more hungry and it's going to want more. So you try to avoid it. There's ways to see these signs. You try to go over skills to see these signs. You try to go over skills to change the mindset when you get into these type of situations. Now, there's treatments, and there's more and more research and studies done that these situations, these disorders, can be very successful with treatment. One of the first things is maybe very basic, but in anything that you're trying to change, improve, or get better at, there has to be a belief, there has to be a commitment. If not, it's essentially difficult or impossible to accomplish it. Understand that there's a lack of understanding of the problem, and there's been a misuse, and it's developed into an addiction, and that this has surpassed you, and you're going to need to get information and help from people that are professionals in this area. So you want to find professional help. While talking to people that have gone through this experience may be helpful, while maybe talking to mentors or leaders in your community, a family member, a grandparent, an uncle, a pastor, a deacon, a teacher. It is important to find health professionals in that field. Not that it's not good to have mentors, but you want to find a professional in the field so that there can be an adequate and a formal assessment of the symptoms, so that we can have a better idea of how severe the disorder is, if there is a disorder, what the situation is, what treatment would probably best fit, if there's any referrals need to be made, if there's any recommendations. You want to find a health professional, whether if it's your primary care physician, whether if you want to find a psychiatrist, psychologist, a professional counselor, an agency, but you want to find somebody that knows and has experience with this area and with this treatment. Because addiction affects many aspects of people's life, like I said, it's very common that as you're dealing with the addiction, other things come up and you have to go through therapy. It's recommended to go individual, group therapy, or a combination even with medication. But treatment has to be tailored for that person. No situation is the same, and you want to be able to treat specifically what you're dealing with that situation. So we call this combination of treatment Medicaid-assisted treatment, and if you're going to take medications to help you deal with addiction, there are certain medications that are FDA approved, not all of them and not everything. And you want to try to again provide the whole patient, the whole aspect. And medications are used when the cravings are too much or too big or too severe, or to relieve severe symptoms of withdrawal as well. At times, treatment may include hospitalization if maybe we need a detox. Maybe that has to go through first, or if there was a significant relapse, or sometimes it's just for whatever situation is needed. Therapeutic communities, maybe a controlled environment, sober houses, or a residential program, or even an outpatient program as well. Again, it depends on the case, depends on the situation. Many people, once they go through that, along with that, or once they're done with these treatments, they join a self-help group like Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, or even include there's groups for family members as well that they can also be included. For example, in my experience with the sex offender groups, while they're going through that treatment, many of them are asked to or even forced by the probation officer or by the therapist to assist at least with the Alcoholics Anonymous group, or to get counseling on the side for different mental health issues that have to do with their compulsive behavior. So what the therapy is recommended is behavioral approaches. The most common or famous one is CBT, cognitive behavioral therapies. Some of the benefits are that it'll help the person understand the behavior, develop higher self-esteem, modify some of the attitudes and behaviors they have towards the drugs, increase their skills, how to handle it, to cope with the circumstances, address some mental health problems. These were some of the techniques that can be used. These are not all of them, obviously. These are some of the ones that I've kind of seen, that I kind of work with. The ones that we've seen, especially with intense cases, for example, within sex offenders, and when we're modifying that compulsive behavior. The first one is the minimal arousal conditioning. So you ask them to get they buy ammonia at the store, not the super strong one, but where they have it in a bottle, a medium size, and a cap that it can easily flip open. The assignment is where they write a story out, and when they're getting aroused, they take a whiff of it. Now, this can be applied, I've seen applied in different situations, not just for this environment, but it's one way. Essentially, what you're trying to do is condition now your brain and yourself that what once was arousing you, now you learn to despise it. Now you learn to have some aversion to it. And as you think of this, and as you get these cravings or these urges, and you might get aroused, now you begin to tie in this disgusting smell, this strong smell, and tie it tie that emotion into what used to arouse you and cause you this compulsive behavior. The ammonia control is basically the same thing, but it was just a smaller bottle, and you didn't have to read something as you take it in your pocket, and as you go throughout the day, and as you would get an arousal, you would just take a whiff of that, just help you remember what was going on. And the covert conditioning is basically, when something would come up, you would tell yourself something, remind yourself mentally of a situation, what the worst consequences could be of this behavior that you're trying to do, that you're going to go to jail, that you're going to have to go back to a hospital, that you're going to have an overdose, whatever it can be, to help you remember to stay away from it. So the last thing to wrap up is, again, I'm fortunate enough to be able to be in private practice and be able to take different type of clients. We encourage you, we make it known that we're a Christian counseling agency. And then the reason why I also put this here is, as we treat with people, it is very important, especially in our field, to consider their belief system and to consider who they are as a person. I try explaining to my clients that the better that I know them and the more I understand them, the better I can treat them, and I can see where they're coming from, and we can understand the situation better. So this is an approach that I use, putting together experience, science, and scripture within my field. And again, this, I believe that it can be applicable in different situations, in different fields, because as we're dealing with people with their physical health or mental health, they make choices in their lifestyle, they make choices in their daily living based on their belief system, based on what they believe is good for them, what they trust, what they have faith in. And it's important to understand that, but it's also important to know that they can all harmonize. So there's new research that can gives us increasing insight that we can tie in faith and spirituality within psychotherapy, and how it including in our brains and even our DNA. Our brain is in a constant flux. It's constant changing and moving in the circuitry, and there's research that shows us that not only the life experiences can change and alter genetic expression, and that genetic expression can be passed down to our future generations. And when neural circuits are active, the activity, within these circuits, within the epigenetics, changes producing proteins that cause the circuit to grow stronger. They can branch out to new connections, recruit new neurons to the circuits, and even make new neurons for this circuit. you'll make new connections, you'll make them stronger. But if this neural circuit is idle, is indifferent, then there's a different epigenetic instructions or coding that begins to grow and reproduce. The protein is no longer available, and begins to prune these circuits and produce over time that these circuits be pruned, that they don't function, they don't exist anymore. So understanding the epigenetics and how they work, these instructions, how they can change neural circuits, we can get insight into how habits are formed. There's constant engagement on certain patterns of behavior activities. The same circuits that cause these DNA changes can produce these proteins to strengthen the circuits that correspond to behavior, and by that, stopping behavior, leaving the circuit idle to DNA expression, actually changes over time the circuit that begins to prune back. So our reward circuit is basically in our limbic system, and our brain was designed, for pleasure, but always through a higher cortex, through a specific way, through pathways that heal and promote greater. A healthy way for our limbic system to get pleasure is, after a long run, you get the runner's high. When you finally grasp to solve something, a solution, when you apply yourself to a hard task, the birth of your child, a healthy love relationship or relationship with someone else, or through hard work and discipline, you've succeeded. Addictions activate pathways as well, but without first activating the higher cortex, therefore resulting in damage to the higher cortex, with the subsequent increased impulsivity, loss of control, greater self-centeredness, destruction of the character. These are consequences and side effects of going through addictions. But not only the limbic system gets strengthened and higher cortex weakened, but the epigenetic gene expression begins to change, and then itself quickly, we can see with research that it's even with the first chemical, with the first time that we can use substance, right? Through daily experience, gene expression can change over time. And if you continue in such healthy path, you can pass along these benefits to your children through a trusting relationship with God. Can help break this cascade of consequences that you're passing along to your generations. One aspect that I believe is important and is a biblical concept, but it is important to apply within addictions, is bringing every thought into captivity. Making sure you're aware, making sure that these skills that you're learning in counseling and therapy, how to recognize the signs, how to identify when I'm beginning to fall, when is an urge, when is a craving, when am I paying attention and talking to this cognitive distortion, when I can bring them all captive and I can filter them through what is pure, through what is positive, through what is going to help me, through what is going to be healthy. I can use the science that we know, and I can use my body how it's designed to begin to to make progress to overcome this. So science has also showed us that if we can avoid this unhealthy behavior, but if we still think about it, we still imagine it, it's as if we are actually doing it, and it's very hard, as if we're actually carrying out this behavior. It's very hard to make the progress that we want to make and to reach the healing that we want. This means that if we long for the addiction in the mind, like in the old days, it's still going to be there. We're still going to be engaged in it, and our characters don't change. So we never experience genuine freedom. The only change, when we only change our behavior but not the thinking, over time our brains actually rewire, and what was once pleasurable in time becomes repulsive. And this is what brings us true freedom. So I had put some of the local resources. I know there's people that aren't here locally, but if you're not here locally, you can look into the website for SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Medical Health Service Administration. And within the website, you can type in your zip code, and it can give you a list of the local areas within a certain radius that you can modify, where you can find help or treatment within addictions or even mental health for veterans as well. And this is their crisis hotline and their website, for taking any help. These are some of the national resources that we can find. And again, these are some of the local ones here. Tropical, Texas, they have LCDCs, licensed chemical dependency counselors, and a substance use disorder program. OZAR is a program, I believe it's a federal program, but it's basically within different agencies. They have an office where they just do screening and assessment, and then they'll refer you to to a place where you can get the help that you need. And the rest are local um, resources, or just find a mental health provider that can help you, like a social worker, licensed chemical dependency counselor, a professional counselor that can help with the situation that you are going through. This is our information. This is our office, and if you have any more questions, you can call, you can email. You can call the office number if you want to set up an appointment locally, or if you want to disseminate the information that is available as well. Mr. Ortiz is our office manager, and that's his phone number here to the office, where we can also continue to clarify any other doubts that you may have. So I know I apologize, I think I went 10 minutes overboard, but I guess we're about done now.
No, you're good. You're good. All right. Thank you so much. That was very eye-opening. We're going to proceed with the interview. For those of you who have any questions, feel free to put them in here. We're still doing good on time. So let's see here. We do have a few folks that came in. Oralia came in. Rudy, she has experience in this area as well. She said she has cut addiction 20 years ago. Wonderful. Okay. Melissa is saying thank you, Mr. Chong. Okay. So welcome to those new folks here. So we're gonna do an interview. I'm gonna pull out a few talking points from his presentation. I had some pointed stuff, but if you have any questions, feel free to start putting them in here. I know. Let's see. I think we had one already too from someone posted it here. Okay, Melissa. Pablo actually has a comment here for a question. Okay, so others keep putting them in there. Now, David, this is really something up my alley. This is something that we talk about, of course, in a different perspective, but nonetheless, when it comes to peak mental and performance and in career and all of these things, addiction is one of the things that needs to be addressed. Of course, we put it in our vernacular, meaning that, breaking bad habits, right? Habits that are not good for your career, habits that are not, but they're the same thing, really and truly. We don't call them. So even my question is on the professional, because you listed some things. Yes, when we talk about addiction, we generally speak about things like, the drugs and so forth, and that is true, right? But there are also professional addictions when we talk about workaholism, for example, right? Workaholics, when we talk about, doing things that sabotage your success over and over again, and the good things. I mean, you talk about spirituality, so we're going to get to that too, because some people need to understand that new science that is developing along those lines again. And those things have ramifications everywhere. The good thing I want to do, I don't do. The bad things I don't want to do, that's what I find myself doing.
Correct.
It goes into that. So can you speak a little bit, though, for the professionals? So now we're saying, yes, these are the regular obvious. What about addictions that professionals go through? For example, you might get off the job, right? You perform good on the job, but hey, your whole marriage is in a mess. Your home is in disarray. And so, but when we come to work, we put on that face, but we go to our substances as we step out those doors. Can you speak on that for a moment?
Sure. So that's actually, I could answer maybe in two parts.
Sure.
It is true that when workaholic or work is one of them as well. And you can basically follow the same characteristics, the same criteria. Where is most of your time going? Where is most of your intensity, your energy? Is it taking over other aspects, other areas of your life that you're not paying attention to, like you mentioned, like family? And simplifying it, I guess it would have to be looking at priorities as well. But then some people could argue, well, my priority is making money, so I'm going to do whatever I have to do. But essentially, if it becomes a compulsive behavior, if it becomes where I'm being so selfish and self-centered, and I'm just focusing on this, and I'm not taking into account sometimes even my own health, my own well-being, my own self-esteem, it can develop into an addictive behavior. I do also want to mention that many times when people work a lot, or we can consider them workaholics, many times that's also an escape for them, precisely for what you're saying, because I have it really hard at home, or my marriage is falling apart, uh, because I don't know what to do with my kid, because this is the only area in my life that I can control, because I'm the boss there, and when I say things get done. So it also depends. That's why I also mention a lot. I mentioned the spirituality part, but anytime that you're dealing with clients or with people, any type of service that you're providing, mental health, physical health, the coaching, it is very important to get to know the person you are dealing with. The person you're dealing with at that very moment is the most important person at that time for you, and getting to know their nuances, getting to know what they think, how they think, will give you a lot of insight as to who they are.
Right.
It's and people are willing to learn and change. They're not so much worried about your title. They're more worried about, can they trust you? Can I make a relationship with you, and can I trust you? Because if they can trust you, then they will be more likely that they'll listen, that they'll want to practice out, or even it'd be more likely that you can push them, confront them, and challenge their ideas without getting resistance from them. So yes, it's true that working too much, that can put um, that in front of other important things in life, that can develop into a compulsive behavior and addiction. But many times it is an escape from where my life is falling apart. I remember I had a client a while ago, and he was putting like 12 to 14 hours at work every day for 6 days a week. But his marriage is falling apart. And that was one of the reasons why he was in session in counseling. So that was his escape. That was his world. He knew what to do there, and he was fine. And even when he was home, part of that time he used it to work out, to study, to relax. Um, so I don't know if I answered completely your question where you're coming from, but yes, it can develop any situation and behavior that can develop into something compulsive. We can actually make the case that it can be addictive.
Yes, and that's really the point. It's not only because, like I said, what I like to do again at the end of each presentation, we are dealing with professionals servicing the client or servicing the patient, but we have to also look at it from a multi-dimensional perspective. Also,
Correct.
that it's not only these bad things of the world that we all agree upon, the drugs and so forth, but as you're saying, anything that can develop into these compulsive behavior can have a negative impact, even if it's so-called a good thing.
Right. Even
Right.
we could say, even regarding with the spirituality, even if it means, outreach or service, or helping others. Many times we go and we help others before we help our own families, and we focus so much on other
Right.
people before we focus on my health. And it can be even a positive thing, like me learning more, or studying the Bible, or sharing something with others, or doing a community service. But if I'm putting that over uh, things that should be important, like my health or like other areas of my life, even positive things can develop into compulsive behavior.
Exactly, and I mean, I'm saying that again. We have many people who are professionals as well, and even for
Right.
myself, I mean, my thing is, I that's my personality and nature too. A type A driven person with goals and these things. And like I said, while I may not necessarily go and mess with drugs because I've already got
Sure.
the bad images of it in my mind, so that doesn't entice me. But for me, I know, I've been caught up in that life and sometimes still have to, watch out on there. But my thing is that when I get caught up into a project, I give it my all to the
Right.
exclusion of everything else, because again, that's part of what we teach also. Some of those things you have to do in order to achieve goals, but they can become destructive and addictive in many ways too.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, so next question. We talk about the mind changes. You give some very good tips on the changes. You were mentioning something with the epigenetics and the genes. I want to tackle that a little bit because not too long ago I did a series on faith and health, And because again, we're trying to bridge those worlds where many people don't understand or fight, they keep fighting against these two realities. But there's someone who is very, very well versed in that area. His name is Dr. Bruce Lipton, PhD, who has been a professor at medical schools. I mean, what he's renowned, okay? But he pretty much he wrote this book called The Biology of Belief, which is faith and spirituality, and showing you how it impacts our genes and what we believe, how we think is what shapes us, who we are at the very core. So it's very thorough. It's a thick book. So I recommend this one too as an extra reading. But how can people in the change process talk a little bit more on the mindset? Like, how do we get them to change? Because behaviors, we can change and modify behaviors, but most of the times if the mindset is not changed, the behavior will just morph into something else, or we go right back into the same thing. So what are some of the CBT ways and things that we could do to maybe help our mindset to change into addictions?
So there's a couple of things when it comes to change. First, a person needs to want it. I know it sounds simple and very basic, but no one's going to change. No one's going to change if they don't want to change. We can want to. We can take them to the professional. We can want to pray for them or provide all the resources. We can buy them or put a whole gym for them in their house, and it's not going to happen if the person doesn't want to. Now, once we can have them buy into it, and we want to have them buy into, or the person needs to buy into something that they believe they can change and they're going to like changing into. If I want to lose weight and I really want to do it and I believe in it, but for example, me, I'm not super excited about going in long distance running. I kind of go jog around with my wife because to please her, but that's not really my thing. I've never really liked it. So we have to find something that you're going to like to do, and then the overwhelming ourselves with, okay, I'm going to go to this goal that sometimes is attainable and unreachable isn't very healthy as well. Because along this, one of the key secrets is to just be consistent. Chip a little bit away, chip a little bit away, chip a little bit away. And as we're within the CBT and as we're in therapy, one of the things that we do is we challenge the thoughts, we challenge their cognitive distortions constantly. You're viewing it this way, and we try to remind them, just because you say it's your truth doesn't make it a truth. There is truth and there's lie, and then there's opinions. And just because you make it, we label, okay, well, this is my truth, this is how I see it, that doesn't necessarily mean that is reality or that is truth. That is essentially just how you're perceiving it and how you're processing it. So in our field, one of our roles is to challenge those thoughts, is to challenge those cognitive distortions, and to make sure that we set them up with tools where they can recognize these signs and where they can be aware that these signs are coming up and stop it before it starts. Or even if it's starting, to be able to find a way to stop this reasoning and this rationale with this cognitive distortion, and fall back into my plan. Remind them always that there's a plan. Stick to the plan. Stick to the plan. Stick to the plan. I don't like to call it mantras, but a lot of people, call mantras. Or just keep something and keep repeating it just so you can stay focused. But this too shall pass. Situations will pass. This uncomfortable feeling is going to pass. This emotion is going to pass. And constantly reminding people that emotions tend to lie to us. Emotions are just signs, but emotions aren't necessarily the reality of what we're going through. It helps us understand my environment, but making a long-term decision based on emotion is very dangerous, and we want to avoid that as well. So goals that are attainable, that I can like, that I can be drawn into, me having that desire to change, being consistent and sticking to a plan, even if it feels uncomfortable, even if it feels like I don't like it, even if I was supposed to, even if I get late to my session 5 minutes, or even if I work out only 15 minutes, or even if I eat well only 3 times a week, but that tomorrow I try again and I stay consistent, and I follow the plan. And when these lies come to my head that are trying to help me justify the behavior that I'm more comfortable in, that I'm able to identify them and fight them back. And the more that I practice this, which is something that we want to reiterate, practice these skills. The more that you practice, like everything else, you're able to form it a habit, and you're able to. It gets easier
Right.
as time goes by if you're able to practice it well.
Awesome, awesome. And again, for those of you who are again in the nursing program or the nurse practitioner program, I recommend that you probably get some of these other resources, because my thing is, this to me, by the way, we may need you to come on a future presentation, because this is one of the things that I'm super excited about. But honestly, when a person understands how to change and how to control their mindset, personally, my belief is this: when you figure that out and you can master that, you can really and truly achieve anything and do absolutely anything and achieve the kind of stuff you want in every area of your life, not just one. But I
Right.
also believe that even for those who are in the faith-based community, that's the reason why they're not succeeding in that area of their life as well. So in fact, it is part of, I put it on pause now, but I was doing a doctoral study, and that was actually my area. And this is actually the abstract for that. I put it in a little book here, but dealing with the mindset, right? And so this really, I recommend you get it. It's an audiobook as well. It's called Win Now, but it really goes into how to deal with the mindset, and how the mindset really is what dictates the behavior. What you see on the outside is a reflection of what's on the inside, but most of the times the traditional way is we work from the outside in. That helps, but I think that from the inside out is the better approach. Okay, so I mean, all approaches, we got to try them, but what I'm saying is that's why I want you to come back on. For those of you who are success minded and who want to do great things in your career and even in your faith, if you really, really want to go to in that area, I beseech you to come back on or check out. I did when I released this book, I actually did a whole 2 series on it. So you might want to go back to our YouTube page and check it out. So anyhow, let me give 2 other resources here real quick for the professionals. So that way, again, because if you can really help your patients to master these things, even though you might not be able to give them a prescription for something, but if you understand how these things work, then you are able to help the patients in many great ways. So number one is, not another one is called Telling Yourself the Truth. And this is by William Backus and Marie is it Chaplin or Chapian, something like that. So anyhow, but it's William Backus. Here's it. It looks like this. So you want to definitely get this. It's called Telling Yourself the Truth. Another is SOS for Emotions. This is a very nice book here as well. And this is written by Lynn Clark. She has a PhD, managing anxiety, anger, depression, and so forth. Of course, next week we're going to talk about depression, but this is a good tool for you to know and understand also. And third, which when you come back on, we'll discuss it as well, because this is one of my best books here on the subject of changing or overcoming and recovering from any kind of limiting behavior. It's called Change or Die by Alan Deutschman. Actually, I recommend you get the audiobook. This will help you personally as a professional also. So this book is called Change or Die, right? And it says, could you change when change matters the most? I really, really highly recommend that you get those sources. So let's talk one more about. Let's talk a little bit more about what was I gonna say here now? So we talk about mental, right, and the mindset. You just answered that one. But let's deal a little bit with social media, social media. That's another book I was working on. Someone do some research for me, but I just haven't published the book as yet. But talk a little bit about the social media addiction, because that one is really becoming uncontrollable, and it is a tough one to break. So any pointers on that? How can we ourselves break it, but how can we also help as young people and older people break the addiction when it comes to social media?
So when it comes to social media and these social platforms, I believe there's some research that I've seen, but it's also part of from my experience and working with people. Social media tends to be either a reflection of what the person is, or also it tends to be some sort of like an alter ego of what the person wants to be. So social media also, in my opinion, doesn't help, or the anonymity factor doesn't help as well. Um, so that is something that we've allowed people to speak their mind, and nobody knows where it's coming from, who it is, who they are. There's burner accounts. There's people just to disrupt, um, different trains of thought or different ideas. But in regards to I guess to spirituality or young adults, I think you're mentioning it, young people. Um, like with anything else, I would question the intentionality of it. What is the point of this account? What is the purpose of this account? Is it just for my entertainment? Is it to promote something? Because the platforms do reach masses, and
Yeah.
many ministries, nonprofits, many agencies can use it to disseminate valuable information. But I would challenge and question the intentionality of it, the purpose for having an account. Um, and then there's social medias and social medias. There's social medias that are famous for just, you know, finding people to for very specific reasons, for sexual reasons, for drugs, for social media just to sell things. So um, I would say that the intention and the purpose matters, as well as a lot of it has to do with the individual themselves. So we have, and statistics show us that depression is going to be the leading cause of a leading illness, and we're having a lot of people that are going through depression, that are anxious, that are going through these cognitive distortions as a reality, and now they're putting all of that and disseminating it to more people. And we're having these, it also kind of puts it, I've seen it where people have enjoy these Twitter wars, as they call it, or these social media wars. So essentially, to me, it's a reflection of the person, of a reflection of the society. Um, it's not very inspiring sometimes because we kind of see more of the negative side of the society.
Yeah.
But I do encourage a parent or the young people or anyone really. What is the point of me opening a Twitter account or an Instagram page or anything that I'm doing? What's the point of me putting this picture? Am I putting it just to look good so people don't think I'm depressed? Am I putting it to make somebody jealous? What are these? Because it basically just intensified and exploded these social interactions. Now, me competing with strangers that have no idea who they are. And a lot of it has to do with the identity of the person behind that account, the self-esteem of that person, the mental health state of that person, the emotional state. Um, in many times, I guess when we're talking about, we could say, I guess, the negative side of social media or the side that worries us. We all agree that it can be very beneficial, but um, it has to do what for? What's the point?
Yeah.
Um,
I got it. You got it. I think that's good right there. And I mean, you're right. I mean, everything. There's always good positive uses of things, but it's not the social media itself is not necessarily the problem. It's just
correct.
our way of managing it. Alrighty, so folks, we're gonna take your questions now. This is the Q&A focus, and so please post your question in if you have one. And so we are gonna start out with a few here. Let's see. I think the first one was by Pablo slash Melissa. Okay, I'm going to put on the screen there. It says, what are the effects of exercise on addiction? Pablo here. What are the effects of exercise on addiction, or maybe how addiction can be aided with exercise?
Well, there's many benefits that we get from exercise, which in physical health and mental health as well. We know that it helps move our bodies, our muscles, where they can stay tense, they can stay in shape, or it brings oxygen to our brain, where even being outside, doing exercise, uh, getting the getting fresh air, movements, vitamin D from the sun, but it's specifically because the other thing is it has to do depend on, um, I guess if we're talking about like a drug addiction, um, it would have to we would have to be healthy enough to do it, to go and to be able to exercise in a way. But there's benefits in the sense that it can be used as an um, alternative activity. Most of the time, we see, and especially in young people, that they use the addictions to the drugs to cope with something they're going through. So we try to find strengths, and we try to find um, sports a lot, exercise that they like, where we can set up a regimen, or where they can begin to cope that way, and they can cut down on the substances as a way to cope with the sadness, with the frustration, and they have a regimen where they're working out. Either they're doing weights, or they're in a gym, or they're doing basketball, football, soccer. Sports also tend to promote a lot of values within teamwork and
Mhm.
health, perseverance, consistency. So exercise brings some of that, but also the social aspect within when it comes to exercise. A lot of research shows that in addictions, one of the worst things can be is isolating yourself, and one of the bigger benefits can be also. I forgot the study of this gentleman. He was Canadian, but he was the first one that started with this rat park, and how he started showing that when you socialize, um, it can take the place, or it can help a lot with cutting back and with overcoming addictions, as you have positive social interactions with
Right.
other people. So um, I don't know specifically what he meant by the question in regards to what are the direct benefits, but um, in general, we can get benefits from exercising that can be beneficial to cutting down the substance abuse, or to replacing that behavior, that habit,
Yeah.
with this positive one.
Yeah, exercise itself. I mean, I have several books about Dr. Cooper, but she talks about that. I mean, exercise itself is a medicine, and
Right.
exercise is helpful in all all situations. So, and I think that somewhat answers a little bit Raul's question. I'm going to take the second question you have, because he was asking about replacing one bad habit with, for example, exercise. So I think folks are saying the same thing on that. You mentioned social interaction, which goes in line with Martha's comment. So I'm going to just put her comment and wrap it with what you said about the, not being isolated and having support groups. So she says, yes, someone has to recognize that there is an issue. Let me put it on the chat here so folks can see it big. Right. So we have to recognize that there is a problem and want to change it, and having a good support person or group is helpful. And that is true, because that's another one of the secret here in Change or Die, this book. Three characteristics of being able to make lasting changes, and one of those indeed is finding a support group or people who model what it is that you're trying to do. So it's not just any support group, it is people who are where you want to be, or so they can function more as a mentor or a coach to pull you along and motivate you to change. Okay, so I think those two go together. Let's take Raul's second question here. So he says, you stated, this is for you, David, you stated that by someone just thinking about something can change their brain wirings. Is that the same thing that would occur if an alcoholic would see a billboard or a commercial related to drinking? They may not go back to it, but they've seen it and they have had to process it and resist it. Does the process of having to resist it make a difference if that person who simply just thinks about it, I guess, out of the blue? Several questions in there, but the point is, again, speak a little bit on the issue of, seeing addiction or thinking about previous behaviors and addictions.
So when it comes to the brain wiring that she mentions at the beginning, the research shows us, and a great deal, and I think you can attest to that. I'm sure Dr. Lipton mentions it, within the book, within the Epigenetics, neuroplasticity, that as you focus on something, as you meditate on something, as you contemplate on something, um, you begin to, within time, and as you do it consistently, it can in fact change the wiring. Part of the basis of the neuroplasticity, part of the situation of why now within addiction they're reviewing treatments or approaches or models. Because at one point we thought that once you're addicted forever and there's no turning back. It's just more of a managing and than actually reverting or making progress. So in that sense, there's a whole process to it. I know it sounds very simple, and I kind of simplified it. I apologize for that. Um, but there is research that shows us that that is doable, or there is a possibility. Now, the other thing I think what I understood was that um, in regards to when you see like a billboard or something that when you get an urge and you're trying to control it. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So definitely, when anytime you're trying to change um, any behavior, essentially you are changing a belief or a mentality or perspective. It's virtually impossible to act without thinking. Even when we might think that we're impulsive, we got so used to doing something, we got so used to believing in something, so we got so used to doing something that it takes us time. It seems almost automatic, but it takes us time to actually stop ordering a certain drink or stop a certain habit. So that is part of the situation within psychotherapy, that you want to make sure that the person has enough skills, that understands cognitive distortions, that understands that there's ways to avoid situations, putting yourself in situations. Sometimes you can avoid putting yourself in a situation, but it's important to get in the habit and practice recognizing signs and how to be able to resist and stay away from it. Now, obviously, the more that we do it, the more it becomes a habit. And as it becomes a habit, we can turn it into a lifestyle. And it'll become easier at some point. It might not even be a temptation or be a craving. It depends on the person. It depends on how intense that craving is or how set that behavior is. But there are different techniques. There are different methods. Especially one of them being a lot with tackling that person's belief system and how is it so rooted in that belief system, and restructuring that belief system to understand that there's value in this change, and in this process of trusting the process of fighting, seeing the signs, fighting the urge, and resisting it.
Yeah.
I don't
I
know
mean,
if
yes, the second part was, I mean, I think it does make sense that, I mean, for someone who has had that issue and someone who does not have that problem, I mean, both of them seeing the same things are not stimulated the same way. Because someone that might have been a battle for many years, and so by them,
absolutely,
they
absolutely,
have to fight more harder. They have to fight much harder than the individual for whom it may not be a problem.
absolutely,
Okay,
absolutely.
got you. I think that should answer that second part there, Raul. If not, you can clarify a little bit more. And I do have a little bit of experience in that. When I was in Puerto Rico, when I was still in the military, I read a book on that particular thing. It's called like Jump in the Mind. And so from my job, actually, not that I was dealing with alcoholism, but it had to do with the same thing, seeing certain images. And so as soon as I would get out of my apartment in Puerto Rico and going to work, this billboard, and I know it was always coming up, right? I know it was always coming up. So every day I had to consciously jump my mind, jump my mind, jump my mind. And after a while, it wasn't even an issue. I wasn't even thinking about it anymore. But ever so often, maybe when you're driving, you might have just stayed in that way, and then it's like all of a sudden the trigger is there. But because I had practiced jumping my mind so much, the urge or the fight wasn't really there. I didn't have to fight so much to resist it because I was practicing for a few months, and then it
Correct.
just became second nature.
Right, right.
Yeah. So these are why I really think that this is really a good topic, because I'm telling you, these are the things that are holding many people back from doing great things. Okay, let's take another one here. Hector says, which type of therapy has the best evidence for drug addiction specifically?
So the one that they usually pair up with, that there's a lot of evidence, is the like curriculums. based on it is on CBT. That's the one that tends to come up, the cognitive behavioral therapy. It tends to focus the person, with the cognitive distortions. It tends to get the person to, along with motivational interviewing, to keep them motivated into the change, the stages of change. And it's CBT is also very helpful to track, because you're monitoring a certain specific goal, specific behavior. So it's one of the therapies that there's more research done in, that there's more trust, because it's evidence based, and you'll hear that a lot in curriculum or in research. Evidence based a lot. There's a lot of curriculum approaching, even in these topics, with something that's very specific at just alcohol or just nicotine, to very broad, like I mentioned, with sex offending or with different types of behavior. But most of them, specifically here in the United States, will or people trust or like them more, have a lot, feel a lot more comfortable using what they call evidence based, where there was some research done with that curriculum and it showed that there was positive outcomes. And most of them, they base it off of CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, because again, you can monitor the behavior and you can track it, you can quantify it, you can measure it a lot better. And essentially, you're changing the mindset to change the behavior.
Awesome. And again, this is one of the reasons I really want to affirm professionals in this area. And so, those of you who are doing this, really and truly, these things are helpful. There are many people out there really battling issues that on their own, and it's taking them longer rather than if you would have, gotten your help. So, what you are doing by learning all these things and whatever you guys are doing in your field, David and nurse practitioners or anyone in the healthcare field, I really appreciate what you do, because one of my thing is we go through so many unneeded suffering or unnecessary sufferings, when if we would have gotten the help, whether it's in our finances, whether it's in our relationship, in our health, if we would have gotten the help, we could have gotten over this thing. And many of us, we've come a long way indeed, but we had to struggle through it because we didn't understand these things like cognitive behavioral therapy or whatever things that you're talking about. So thank you for really and truly what you are doing. And I really wish that you would be the best at what you do. Go out to extra limb. I think it's time for patients and healthcare providers to have even a closer relationship. This ought to be a teamwork. I know for me personally, I do not like going to anyone and it's not a relationship. It's just like, oh, you just in and just like your number. What's your problem? What are your symptoms? Okay, take this and go. You know what I mean? Like those things really don't really help many people.
Right.
But when you come close to them, you touch them, you feel them, you are able to listen to them, you're giving them extra tips and advice, they really appreciate you. I think that will be in the next wave as we are going through a cycle in healthcare. That will be the next wave of good relationship between patients and their providers. Any last word on that? Hector has another one. Any CBT tips for lay people who may not have access, there we go, to a professional therapist? Any advice? Well, one is, again, get that book. We were talking about SOS and the other one. Okay. This is called, again, telling yourself the truth, which is pretty much CBT, right, on yourself. This one is talking about SOS for your emotions. I do have a book as well called, this one though is faith-based, but nonetheless the principles are there. So this one is called Power Pack Spiritual Affirmations for Men and Women. There's a men version and a woman version. It's also in an audiobook. This is one of the things that I do on my own self on a daily basis. The audiobook is about 30 minutes. So I try to listen to that almost every day as much as I can, and to help myself, to give me the kind of mindset and behaviors and attitudes that I want. And the good thing about it goes through the different areas of your life. So it's not just one area. So I have stuff about your mental health, your emotional health, your physical health, spiritual, social, professional, financial, all the key areas of your life, what it is that you want to be the reality. And so any other tips that you can share, but those books, all of them, trust me, they will be helpful. Dr. Bruce Lipton's, he has a couple of videos on there as well. For some of you who may not be as academic or technical, like he goes into a whole lot. But if you just listen for the basic idea behind it, I think you'll be good to go. And then also for those of you who are also on the faith-based arena, I did a sermon series on this very thing, the faith and belief. So you can check our website for that, where I actually broke down not only his book but several other books and show you how faith and science really, they don't have to be separated and be fighting about it. So if you check those out, you will be I think you'll be good to go. So David, I leave you to make the closing remarks and offer any extra tips for the average person to implement CBT or anything else actually that will help them.
I mean, well, regarding CBT, it's something, fortunately, it's very studied, it's very researched, it's very written on, widely written on. So, I mean, you can even Google it. There's websites where they have like worksheets and they like self-help, and you can go through them where you get the basic knowledge. There's a lot of free material that is now going on, and even in, basic introduction to what it is, videos in YouTube. Essentially what it is attempting to change and modify the cognition will then result change the behavior. That is the gist of it, and that's what we're trying to do. But I guess, just closing is, I agree with what you're saying right now towards the end. It's always important to just keep moving forward, keep taking, even if it's small steps, keep taking steps, because time is going to pass by no matter what. Whether you do something or not, time keeps passing by, clock keeps ticking, and at the end of the year, at the end of the week, at the end of the month, do you have something to show for those seconds that you were given or that you lived? So even if it's something small during the day or during the week, it will add up if you are consistent with that. Like I said, time will pass by. It's going to depend on us if we do something with the time or not. And it also, with everything that you've been saying, Mr. Chance, it depends what you believe in. Belief matters a lot. There's a whole science of belief, and it does matter a lot in what we believe. There's nothing wrong in questioning what we believe, and there's nothing wrong with questioning on the beliefs that we've been taught. And remember that there is truth and there is lie, and it is important to learn how to discern it and how to look for new truths, and how to also implement it and apply it. One of the things that I tell with a lot of clients are these cliches, and I don't believe knowledge is power. I believe practicing knowledge can be powerful, because we can have a lot of knowledge, but we can just hoard it. And what's the point of that? There's no good in that. You wouldn't get $1 million and dig it, put it underground. It's no good to anybody like that. So we can have a lot of knowledge, but if we don't learn how to make it practical, to apply, to share it, it really doesn't matter. So, even if it's something small, make a change, do it. And just keep on searching for the truth. That's the quest that will always bring positive results.
I so agree with that. Applied knowledge is what we need. Wisdom is the application of knowledge. So many of us know things, but it's when we do them. All right. Thank you so much again, Mr. Chong, for being with us tonight, taking your time out of your busy schedule to share these wonderful insights. I think we learned quite a bit tonight. For those of you, again, I put a list of books here. You can take a quick screenshot of it that you can go ahead and follow up with. Let me put back David's contact information in case you want to get a hold of him. Oops, it's not this one. Well, since we're on this slide, remember, if you want to invite any other person to this webinar, it's strategicsecrets.com/weekly webinar. Next week, we have Dr. Americo Baca that will be on, and we have Dr. Judith will be on as well with us. Judith Fisher will be on with us. So Monday is Dr. Baca, and Thursday next week will be Dr. Fisher. So please make sure that you are with us So let me put the slide here if you want to take a screenshot of it. There we go. In new today counseling services is number 956-678-7395. Again, that's 956-678-7395. There's an office number as well, 956-536-8363. If you registered, if you actually put your email in for this particular presentation, then you will be emailed automatically the 24-hour replay. But again, it's only a 24 hours. So make sure that if you needed to, recheck on something, then, look out for the video as well. Okay. Let's see. Closing remarks here from the audience. Let's see here. Very much appreciative. Okay. Melissa is saying very much appreciative. Thank you. Raul says thank you very much. Thank you so much. And then we have Hector says, really enjoyed today's session. Thank you so much. So you appreciate it. Thank you, man. Really, really. You did an awesome job today.
Glad we could help.
Okay, let me broadcast this again. So please, if you need to take a quick shot of this, go ahead and do so. I'm going to leave it up for just another 3 seconds. And let me broadcast the list to you one more time of some of the stuff that you can check out. And again, everyone has their views. So I hope that, again, as academicians and people of who can think, sometimes we do have to challenge, certain perspective. But nonetheless, I take the philosophy as like this: take what you can and throw what you can't use. So if it's not for you, it's not your cup of tea, there's no need to demonize everybody. What you do is, hey, I take this part, this works for me. The other part, I throw it out. That's fine. That is simply fine. We just exchanging information, and whatever can help, we want to be able to help thereby. Okay, so wonderful. That's the end of today's presentation. Thank you so much for joining us for our Secrets of Mental and Emotional Wellness Masterclass series. I'll see you again on Monday evening at 7:30 p.m. Have a good night. Take care.